Welcome to World History, Early Modern. Some of you may be asking, why am I studying the past? Historian and author David McCullough once said, "History is who we are and why we are the way we are." This quote sums up why history should matter to all of us. Yes, you come from somewhere. There is a reason why you live in your town, your state, your country. And people came before you. They made it possible for you to be, well, you. Maybe a family member bravely immigrated across the ocean, leaving ancestors behind to make their own way. Perhaps one of your forefathers bore the cruel yoke of oppression for a lifetime, only tasting freedom for a few short, sweet years after emancipation. Or maybe your great-great-grandmother stood proudly at the front of the line as her local federal polling station opened its doors to women for the first time. All of these people who came before you and the things they experienced, this is what is sewn into the fabric of you. When you study history, you develop a deeper appreciation of who you are and where you come from. But history is bigger than just you. History is why there's a rule of law that ensures the protection of your rights, but also the rights of others. It's why some are born into a world of opportunity. It's also why others have to scratch and claw their way out, battling deeply embedded societal issues. History gives a voice to these stories. Stories of life and death, triumph and tragedy, success and failures, morality and corruption, efforts to unite and efforts to divide. When you absorb these stories, you are empowered with empathy and understanding. History enables you to, as the saying goes, walk a mile in someone else's shoes. You are able to understand people's ideologies and values. It helps you frame the world in which you live. History lets you learn from the past mistakes of others. Let's face it, people have done a lot of messed up stuff. Why? How can we make sure this doesn't happen again? How can I be better? History equips you to understand change, and change is hard in society, but also individually. Studying history requires you to consider opposing viewpoints that challenge what you believe to be true. History opens your mind to reason on questions such as, why does prejudice exist? Why do humans go to war? How can I change the world for the better? History is inevitable. It happened. It is happening. It will happen. You will be a part of it. That's a guarantee. You might as well understand who you are and why you are the way you are. Our essential questions are, why is it important for me to study world history? We already answered this one in the intro. Next, let's look at, what will I be learning? What skills will I master? What goals can I set for myself? And before we continue, we want to let you know that you can print out the lesson PDFs as well as PDFs for the rest of the lessons in this unit ahead of time. If you prefer to complete them electronically on a PDF editor, that's cool too. Just have them ready and you'll be good to go. If you haven't completed the preview in the PDF, please do so now and get ready to jot down some notes in your guided viewing section. In our World History Early Modern course, we are going to be focusing on the years 1750 to 1950. Now, over the course of Earth's existence, 200 years is nothing. It's a blip. But in these 200 years, a lot happened on our planet. The content of our course will be divided into 3 parts. The first is entitled Absolutism to Revolution. Leading up to 1750, Europe had largely been ruled by monarchs who allowed very little say in how things were done. But over time, a philosophical movement known as the Enlightenment emerged. It encouraged people to challenge traditional notions of authority and to consider the good of the many rather than the few. Enlightenment thinkers dared to ask questions. What gives someone the right to rule? What rights are people born with? What are the duties of the government and the governed? And what happens when the government is questioned by the masses? Revolution! And not just in Europe, but all over the Western Hemisphere. Your home country may have emerged from one of these revolutions. That brings us to part 2. Industrialism to imperialism. In the wake of revolutions and newly formed constitutions, nations looked for ways to not just survive, but thrive. Led by Great Britain, countries began to industrialize and were producing goods at a rate not seen before. This rapid growth prompted new questions. How much should the government be involved in the economy? How does society determine the economic system that will work best for its people? But industry kept chugging along, creating new societal questions faster than the old ones could be answered. Nations built wealth and power, and new means of transportation granted the ability to forge global connections. And, at the same time, these nations became aware of the limitations their own borders placed on them. There was a finite amount of raw materials available. What lay in the world beyond? And thus began the race for territory. This was nothing new. European countries had searched for trade routes and new land for centuries. Remember all those revolutions in the Americas? Yeah, well, who do you think they kicked out? The European colonial powers. But this era of imperialism took it to the next level. Africa, Southeast Asia, Oceania, these lands were snatched up in a fervent, relentless competition between industrialized nations for new sources of materials and, let's face it, a new place to say, hey, I own this. And can you guess what happened next? Let's hear it from an industrialized nation. We're a powerful nation with an advanced industry and the resources to expand. But we're finding out that, well, we're not the only ones snatching up land. We can't miss out on the last piece of the pie. Because we are better than everyone else, and our country has to continue being the best. And we've got to bulk up our military to prove it. And we're learning who our friends are and who our enemies are. So let's make sure we work together to keep our stuff from these other guys. And then one day, an archduke was shot in Sarajevo. The world was at war. Yep. That's part 3, the world at war. The war to end all wars. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Took 20 million lives. Not to be outdone, just over 20 years later, the Second World War would quadruple that number. 80 million dead. Why? How could this happen? Would the world ever recover? Now, we're not just going to throw you into the deep end of history without a flotation device. Just as a craftsman acquires knowledge, skills, and tools over time, you'll be filling out your historian's toolbox with new ways to approach history. Your most important tool is one you already have, your mind. We'll help you to tap into its power to think like a historian. You'll learn to zoom out and look at the big picture and then zoom back in to examine multiple perspectives, some different than what you've seen or heard. But who knows what to believe? After investigating primary and secondary sources, the lifeblood of a history class, you will work on critically assessing a source's credibility. You'll see how every action has a reaction. No, wait, this isn't science class. Well, it applies here too. You see, nothing is ever an isolated incident. So historians, what can you strive for as we embark on this adventure together? First, keep an open mind. There's never just one way to interpret something that happened in history. There's always a voice you haven't heard before. Listen for those voices. Second, keep digging. Understanding history is not memorizing facts about a bunch of dead guys in the past. There is always a story, and there's always more to that story than you originally thought. Keep asking questions. Finally, see yourself in the past. How would you have reacted? What would you have done? Walk a mile in the shoes of those who came before you, and connect these events to your present. Historians, it is our hope that you will emerge from this course not with a head full of facts and figures, but with a broader understanding of the world around you and the skills needed to analyze, hypothesize, and empathize. Why is that important? Because history is who you are, and it's why you are the way you are. History is everywhere.
Hey, hey.